The rain hammered against the windshield as Marcus Chen pulled his Tesla into the familiar driveway of a modest townhouse in suburban Portland. 5 years had passed since he'd last stood at this door. 5 years since the divorce papers were signed. 5 years since he'd walked away from the only woman who'd ever truly known him. His hands trembled on the steering wheel, not from the cold, November air seeping through the crack in his window, but from the weight of what he was about to do. Through the rain-streaked glass, he could see the porch light flickering, the same light that had guided him home countless times during their 12-year marriage. Sarah had always meant to fix it. Some things, he thought with a bitter smile, never change. But he had changed. Everything had changed. And that's exactly why he was here, about to face the woman whose heart he'd shattered in his relentless pursuit of success. Marcus had been nobody. When Sarah married him, a struggling software developer working 80-hour weeks in a cramped apartment that smelled perpetually of instant ramen and desperation. She'd been a kindergarten teacher with a smile that could light up the darkest room and a faith in him that bordered on irrational. "You're going to change the world. Someday," she'd whisper during those lean years when dinner was spaghetti for the third night in a row. "I can feel it." She'd been right, in a way. His app, a revolutionary platform connecting freelance workers with employers, had exploded beyond his wildest dreams. Within 3 years of launch, he'd become a millionaire 50 times over. Forbes featured him. Ted invited him to speak. Venture capitalists courted him like he was royalty. But success had come with a price tag Sarah hadn't agreed to pay. The late nights turned into absent days. Business trips stretched from weekends to weeks. The man who'd once quoted poetry to her over cheap wine started speaking only in profit, margins, and market shares. The final straw came when he missed their 12th anniversary, not for an emergency, but for a networking dinner he deemed too important to skip. "I don't recognize you anymore," Sarah had said the day she filed for divorce, her voice eerily calm. "You've become everything you promised you'd never be." He'd been too proud, too consumed by his empire building to fight for her. He'd signed the papers, written her a generous check, as if money could compensate for emotional abandonment, and walked away, convincing himself he'd made the logical choice. Building a legacy required sacrifices. She'd understand someday. Except he was the one who'd come to understand. 6 months ago, Marcus's world had tilted on its axis. His younger sister Emily had been diagnosed with stage 3 breast cancer. Watching her fight for her life, watching her husband David hold her hand through every chemotherapy session, every wave of nausea, every moment of terror, it had cracked something open inside. Marcus, that all his wealth and success had sealed shut. "You know what the worst part is?" Emily had whispered to him one night in the hospital. Her once vibrant hair gone, her skin paper thin. "It's not the pain or the fear of dying. It's thinking about all the moments I might miss." David's laugh. "My kids' graduations, Sunday morning pancakes. The small stuff, Marcus. The stuff you can't buy back." Her words had haunted him. They'd burrowed into his consciousness and forced him to examine the empire he'd built and the ruins he'd left behind. He'd started attending therapy, peeling back layers of ambition-driven denial. And with each session, Sarah's face became clearer in his mind. Not the angry woman who'd signed the divorce papers, but the girl who'd believed in him when he was nothing, who'd held him through his father's death, who'd celebrated his smallest victories like they were Olympic gold medals. He'd heard through mutual friends that Sarah was struggling. Her mother had suffered a severe stroke 2 years ago and required round-the-clock care. Sarah had moved her into her home, cut back her teaching hours, and was drowning in medical bills that insurance barely touched. The same friends mentioned she'd aged a decade in 5 years, that the light in her eyes had dimmed to a flicker. Marcus had wanted to help immediately, but his therapist had challenged him. "What's your intention here? Absolution? Control? Genuine amends?" The question had stopped him cold. He'd spent weeks examining his motives, ensuring he wasn't trying to buy forgiveness or ease his own guilt. This wasn't about him. It couldn't be about him. Now, sitting in his car outside her home, Marcus clutched the folder on his passenger seat. Inside were documents that represented months of work, consultations with lawyers, financial advisors, and his sister, whose clarity in the face of death had become his moral compass. He stepped out into the rain, pulling his coat tight against the wind. The doorbell echoed through the house, a sound he'd once known as intimately as his own heartbeat. Footsteps approached, hesitant and slow. When Sarah opened the door, Marcus felt his breath catch. She was thinner, her hair streaked with premature gray, worry lines etched deep around her eyes. But those eyes, those same honey-brown eyes that had once looked at him with such love, now regarded him with a mixture of surprise and guarded suspicion. "Marcus?" Her voice was barely above a whisper. "What are you doing here?" "I know I have no right to show up unannounced," he began, rain streaming down his face. "But there's something I need to give you." "May I come in?" "Just for a few minutes." Sarah hesitated, her hand tight on the doorframe. Finally, she stepped aside. 5 minutes. The house was exactly as he'd imagined, lived in but struggling. Toys scattered across the floor suggested she was babysitting to make extra money. Medical equipment occupied one corner of the living room. The walls held photos of her students, her mother, her sister's family. None of him. He'd been erased as he deserved. "Sarah, I'm not here to apologize," Marcus said, seeing her stiffen. "Words can't undo what I did. I put ambition before love, success before you, and I lost everything that mattered while gaining everything that doesn't." "Then why are you here?" Her voice was cold, protective. He placed the folder on the coffee table between them. "Because my sister is dying, and it's teaching me what actually matters. Because you deserve better than the hand life has dealt you. Because I can help. And for once in my selfish life, I want to do something with no strings attached." Sarah didn't touch the folder. "I don't want your money, Marcus." "It's not money. Open it." With trembling hands, she did. Inside were documents establishing a trust fund, not in her name, but in her mother's. Enough to cover all medical expenses, in-home nursing care, and ensure her mother could live in comfort for the rest of her life. The trust was irrevocable and managed by a third party. Sarah's name appeared nowhere as a beneficiary, eliminating any tax burden or obligation to Marcus. But there was more. A second document outlined an anonymous scholarship fund he'd established in Sarah's name at her school, ensuring that underprivileged children would receive the educational support they deserved, the same kind of support she'd always fought to provide. "I don't understand," Sarah whispered, tears streaming down her face. "Why would you do this?" "Because you spent 12 years believing in me when I was nothing. Because you sacrificed your dreams to support mine. Because when you needed me, I wasn't there." His voice cracked. "I can't undo the past, Sarah, but I can ensure that your mother receives the care she deserves, that you can go back to teaching full-time, that the kids you love so much have opportunities. This isn't about us. It's about doing one decent thing in a life filled with selfish choices." "I can't accept this," she said, but her hands clutched the papers. "You already have. The trust is activated. Your mother's care starts Monday. The scholarship launches next semester." He stood, preparing to leave. "I don't expect forgiveness. I don't expect anything. I just needed you to know that the best thing I ever did was loving you. And the worst thing I ever did was forgetting that success, without people to share it with, is just expensive loneliness." He'd reached the door when her voice stopped him. "Marcus, wait." He turned. Sarah stood there, tears running freely now, the papers clutched to her chest. "Thank you," she whispered. Then, after a long pause, "How's Emily?" That simple question, her caring about his sister despite everything he'd done, broke him. Marcus felt tears he'd held back for months finally fall. Fighting. She's fighting so hard. Sarah walked toward him, and for one impossible moment, she reached out and took his hand. Not romantically, not with forgiveness, but with the compassion that had always defined her. "I'll pray for her," she said softly. "And Marcus, for what it's worth, I'm glad you finally found your way back to the person I always knew you could be." As Marcus drove away that night, his heart felt lighter than it had in years. He hadn't won Sarah back. He probably never would, but he'd done something more. Important, he'd honored who she'd always been by, becoming someone worthy of having known her. 3 months later, Emily went into remission. Marcus sold his company and started a foundation, supporting cancer research and caregiver assistance programs. He never told Sarah, but he named it The Light That Guides Foundation. After that flickering porch light that had once meant home, some gestures don't fix the past, but sometimes they illuminate the future, and sometimes that's enough.